Imagine, like training for these really intense situations. Like if you had to de-escalate someone who's having a mental health crisis, but you could do it without like any real world risk.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying augmented reality could do for police training.
Yeah, that's what we're diving into.
Exactly. And we've got a dissertation here all about using AR for, law enforcement training,
Hmm.
plus a ton of research on like all the ways police training has evolved, over time,
Right.
and how VR and AR work in other fields too.
Yeah, it's more than just, like a shiny new tech thing.
Right.
This is a tool um, with real potential to, like, change how we prepare law enforcement.
Exactly, yeah. For all those really difficult challenges they face.
Absolutely. The complex realities of the job.
So for this deep dive, we're going to really look at why augmented reality is like becoming so important for law enforcement. And we're going to see how it's already changing police training, you know, even today.
Yeah.
So let's start with the history of police training.
Okay.
I mean, it's come a long way from like those old military style drills.
Oh, yeah. Think about, the early days of police training. It was really kind of a boot camp mentality.
Okay.
Focused on physical strength and just, like, following orders.
So like learning the basics, but not really preparing them for what they would face.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, out on the streets.
Yeah.
Those unpredictable situations.
Totally.
Then as society changed, so did the expectations of, what we wanted from law enforcement.
Right.
Scenario-based training, that became a lot more common.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem was it's expensive to set up.
Right.
All those really realistic scenarios.
Yeah.
And plus, it's hard to really recreate that unpredictable nature of, what happens out there in the real world.
Yeah, the chaos. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's where this augmented reality stuff comes in, right?
Yeah, augmented reality can bridge that gap
Okay.
between, what officers learn in training and what they're going to face.
So it's that bridge between the classroom and the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so can you talk a bit more about how that actually works?
Sure. So augmented reality allows us to create these training environments that are really immersive.
Mm-hmm.
And officers can actually experience all sorts of scenarios.
Okay.
I mean, everything from traffic stops, to mental health crises,
Okay.
all without, real-world consequences.
Which is huge, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about someone who's having a mental health issue.
Right.
Where that traditional approach of like taking control might not be the best way to do things.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
In these situations, you really need to focus on teaching officers empathy and patience
Mm-hmm.
and how to actually communicate effectively.
It's a different skill set.
It is.
Yeah, it is. So how does AR training actually work in those situations? Can you give us an example?
Okay, so picture this, right? You've got an officer, they're wearing a headset.
Mm-hmm.
And this headset projects, computer-generated images.
Okay.
And it puts those images right on top of their view of the real world.
Okay, so they're seeing both.
Exactly. So they might be in, like, a virtual neighborhood
Right.
and interacting with avatars,
Okay.
that represent, like, different members of the community.
Okay.
And the program can actually, throw some unexpected challenges their way.
So they're like walking through this simulation and they have to think on their feet.
That's the idea.
Hmm.
They're practicing those, crucial skills, but in a safe environment.
Makes sense. Yeah.
One program, it's called ICCAT.
Okay.
That's the Integrating Communications Assessment and Tactics program.
Okay.
It uses AR to really improve decision-making in those high-pressure situations.
Mm-hmm.
And research on IC has shown that it can actually help reduce the number of times officers have to use force.
That's amazing.
It's a real impact.
Yeah. So AR isn't just for mental health situations,
Right.
right? You were saying earlier that it's also used to help officers learn about cultural sensitivity
Yeah.
and how to navigate, diverse communities.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
instead of just, like, reading about different cultures in a book,
Right.
officers can actually use AR to practice interacting,
Okay.
with diverse community members in these simulations.
Interesting.
And they're allowed to, make mistakes and learn from them.
Right. Without any real world consequences.
Exactly.
This is fascinating. So what kind of research are scientists actually doing to see how well this training actually works?
Well, there are a lot of different ways that researchers are, studying AR training.
Okay.
Some of them use these controlled experiments
Mm-hmm.
where they can, like, very carefully adjust different factors
Okay.
to see how AR is impacting learning.
Right.
But those experiments sometimes don't really feel, realistic.
So, like, really precise, but maybe not so applicable to the real world.
Exactly.
No.
Other researchers use something called quasi-experimental designs.
Okay.
And they look at what happens when, like, groups of officers who have received AR training
Mm-hmm.
and those who haven't, go out and do their jobs.
Okay.
And they see how they perform.
That seems more like what's actually happening.
Right. It's a little more real world.
So, what other methods are they using?
Well, then there are qualitative studies,
Okay.
which use things like, interviews and observations
Mm-hmm.
to really get a deeper understanding of, what officers are experiencing during this AR training.
Right. Get at the human side of things.
Exactly. And then finally, you've got these meta-analyses.
Okay.
And these are basically really big research studies
Okay.
that look at the findings from lots of smaller studies
Okay.
to try to get a more complete picture.
So they're like trying to zoom out and see the big picture. Yeah.
Exactly. But it can be hard because, all those smaller studies might have used different methods
Right.
or even different types of AR technology.
Gotcha. So it sounds like researchers face a lot of challenges, doing research in this field.
They do.
What are some of the hurdles that they're dealing with?
Well, one challenge is that a lot of these studies only have like a small number of officers involved.
Right.
And that makes it hard to say for sure if, AR is actually effective.
So more data is always better.
Always better.
Okay.
Another problem is that, AR technology is changing so quickly,
Right.
it's hard for research to keep up.
It's always evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the question of long-term effects.
Mm-hmm.
Most studies look at how officers do, right after training.
Okay.
But we really need more research that, follows them over time.
So looking at that long-term impact, yeah.
Exactly.
Were there any studies, in your research that you found particularly interesting?
Yeah, there was this study just published this year
Okay.
by Martindale and a team of researchers.
Okay.
And they looked at the stress responses of officers
Okay.
during this AR training.
Okay.
And what they found was the officers' bodies were actually reacting to the simulations, almost as if they were like really in those situations.
Yeah.
Their heart rate went up.
Yeah.
Their stress hormones went up,
Yeah.
just like they would if they were actually facing, a real threat.
So it's not just like a mental workout, it's a physical thing too.
It is. That physical response, it's really important for learning
Mm-hmm.
because it helps our brains, remember what to do in similar situations.
Right, like training your body to react.
Exactly. It's like giving them a safe way to experience the stress
Yeah, okay.
of the real world.
Was there another study that stood out to you?
Yeah, there was another fascinating one also published this year,
Okay.
done by Kaserman and his colleagues.
Huh.
And they wanted to see if adding a physical element to, actually, this is VR training,
Okay, VR, okay.
would make it, even more realistic.
Mm.
So they used this special device
Okay.
that gave officers a safe but like realistic sensation of being shot during the simulation.
Oh, wow. Okay. So how did the officers respond to that?
There were mixed reactions.
Okay.
Some officers found it distracting,
Okay.
while others said it actually helped them, focus and made the training feel more real.
Right.
It's definitely a controversial approach.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it brings up, those ethical questions about how far we should go
Right.
to make these simulations feel real.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that, AR is this really powerful tool,
Right.
and it has to be used responsibly and ethically.
It's not just about the technology, it's how you use it.
Exactly. It's about, how we use it to prepare these officers for the real world.
So we've talked about like the history of police training, how AR actually works, and some of the research behind it.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the main takeaways from all this?
Well, I think the research suggests that AR has this incredible potential to, change police training.
Mm-hmm.
It can create these really engaging experiences
Yeah.
that are more effective and less expensive than traditional training methods.
Just huge. Yeah.
But there are also some things we really need to, think about.
Okay.
We need more research,
Yeah.
particularly, studies that look at those long-term effects.
Right.
And we need to be really careful about how we use AR
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that it's ethical
Yeah.
and that it considers the well-being of the officers being trained.
Right. So it's great that it can make training more effective,
Yeah,
but we need to be responsible and ethical about how we use it.
absolutely.
What are some of the things, we should be thinking about as AR training becomes more and more common?
Well, one thing's access.
Okay.
We need to make sure that all police departments can use this technology,
Okay.
not just, the ones that have a lot of money.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's not just a tool for the wealthy.
Yeah. We don't want to create a situation where, only certain departments have this advantage
Right.
of AR training.
It makes sense that everyone should have access to the best training.
Yeah.
What else should we be thinking about?
We also need to make sure that AR training really reflects, the communities that police serve.
Right.
We don't want to accidentally create, training scenarios that are biased
Right.
or that don't really match the real world.
So it needs to be relevant and, representative of the community they're working in.
Exactly. And we need to figure out how to measure, the long-term impact of AR training.
Okay.
Does it actually help officers make better decisions out on the street?
Right.
Does it lead to, less use of force?
Mm-hmm.
Does it improve relationships between, the police and communities?
Right.
These are the questions that'll tell us if, AR training is actually valuable.
That makes sense. So we've covered a lot, already.
Yeah.
The history of police training, how AR actually works, the research behind it.
Yeah.
Now I'd like to shift gears a bit and talk about the psychological and ethical considerations of, using AR to train police officers.
Sure.
Because we're talking about, putting officers into these virtual environments that feel very, very real, even triggering, those fight or flight responses that we were talking about earlier.
That's right.
So it's not just a game, it's a really powerful experience.
It is.
What are some of the risks we need to consider?
Well, one big concern is whether, repeated exposure to violence in these simulations, even though it's for training,
Right.
could actually make officers less sensitive to violence in the real world.
Okay. Yeah.
Could it, blur the lines?
Yeah, that's a bit concerning.
It is.
What are researchers saying about that?
It's an area that needs a lot more research.
Okay.
But, some experts are worried.
Okay.
They say that, we need to be really cautious about the types of scenarios that we're creating
Okay.
and the level of violence that we're showing.
Right. So being mindful of the content and the potential impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's not just about violence.
Okay.
We also need to think about the emotional and psychological effects of going through these simulations,
Right.
over and over again.
Are we talking about things like PTSD or, anxiety and even burnout?
Exactly. I mean, imagine having to make, these life or death decisions
Yeah.
repeatedly, even if it's in a virtual world.
Right.
That could take a toll.
It makes sense that they would need time to recover
Absolutely.
after those kinds of experiences.
That's why those debriefing sessions are so important. Officers need a chance to process what they've been through,
Okay.
to talk about how they're feeling, and to get support,
Right.
if they need it.
It's about remembering that officers are humans, not machines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's where ethical guidelines come in. These AR training programs need to be created with the well-being of officers in mind.
Yeah, okay.
That includes things like getting informed consent
Right.
from officers before they start training,
Yeah.
avoiding unnecessary violence in the simulations,
Okay.
and making sure officers have access to mental health resources.
It's not just about the technology.
It's not.
It's about using it ethically and responsibly.
Technology is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
We decide how to use it.
That's a good point. So with all these potential risks, why even use AR for police training? Why not just stick with the old ways?
Well, AR offers something that traditional training really can't, and that's the ability to create these incredibly realistic experiences
Yeah.
that trigger those, real emotions and those physical responses.
Right.
And as we've seen, those are really important for learning.
They are.
They help us remember, what to do, make better decisions under pressure, and even develop empathy.
So it's about finding the right balance, right?
Right.
Using the power of this AR, but also managing the risks that come with it.
Yeah, we've got to find that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Where we can, maximize the benefits,
Right.
but minimize the potential harm.
This leads perfectly into the final part of, our deep dive.
Okay.
where we'll explore what the future holds for AR in police training.
Okay.
We'll look at how it might, change law enforcement
Hmm.
and what it could mean for, society as a whole.
Yeah.
But first, why don't we take a quick break to gather our
Yeah,
thoughts?
good.
And we'll come back and dive into that final part of our discussion.
Great.
Imagine being in a life-threatening active shooter situation. What would you do? The Alive Active Shooter Survival Training Program by RRR Investigations empowers you with life-saving strategies. ALIVE stands for Assess, Leave, Impede, Violence, and Expose. 5 critical steps to protect yourself and others. Our training goes beyond instinct, teaching you to recognize potential threats, react with confidence, and survive through proven techniques, whether you're an individual, a workplace, or a school. The Alive program equips you to stay calm and make split-second decisions that save lives. Thank you for listening to the Virtual Reality Reconstructionist. Visit www.RRR Alive for training opportunities.
Welcome back to our deep dive into augmented reality police training
We've been talking about how police training has evolved.
and how AR is taking things to a whole new level.
Right.
Now it's time to really look ahead to the future of this technology and
Right.
its impact on, policing as a whole.
Absolutely.
So what do you think? Like, what can we expect to see in the next, 5-10 years?
Well, one thing's for sure, AR is not just a passing trend.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental shift
Okay.
in how we approach training for, these high-stakes jobs,
Mm-hmm.
like law enforcement.
Yeah.
We can expect to see even more advanced AR training programs.
What kinds of advancements are you, most excited about?
The technology is evolving so rapidly.
Yeah.
Imagine scenarios that are even more realistic. Avatars that behave in a more intelligent way.
Mm-hmm.
And even the use of biofeedback to create like a truly personalized training experience.
So you're talking about going beyond just what the officer sees and hears in the simulation.
Exactly.
It's like integrating their body's reactions into the training.
Right.
Their heart rate, their breathing, even their stress levels.
Yeah, that kind of personalized training could help officers understand their own reactions to stress
Okay.
and develop strategies for staying calm,
Mm-hmm.
making good decisions under pressure.
Which is essential in law enforcement, right?
Absolutely.
When those split-second decisions have, serious consequences.
Yeah.
What other interesting developments are you seeing on the horizon?
I'm particularly interested in the potential of AR for collaborative training.
Okay.
Imagine officers from different departments,
Okay.
even different countries,
Wow.
training together in a shared virtual world.
That's amazing. So instead of each department having its own isolated training,
Exactly.
they could be learning from each other, sharing best practices,
Hmm.
even building relationships with colleagues across jurisdictions.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
What are some of the technical challenges, though, involved in creating these shared virtual environments?
Well, building that seamless experience
Yeah,
for multiple users in different locations, it takes a lot of technical power.
right.
One of the biggest challenges is data synchronization.
Okay.
Every movement, action, interaction
Mm-hmm.
needs to be transmitted and updated in real time
Right.
so that everyone's seeing the same thing
Right.
and having that realistic experience.
I can imagine that's a ton of data flying around.
It is.
What about the platforms themselves?
Yeah.
What kind of, technology is needed to actually make that happen?
There are a few different approaches being used.
Okay.
Some platforms rely on cloud-based systems
Mm.
where all the data is processed and shared through a central server.
Okay.
Others use a peer-to-peer approach
Okay.
where each user's device shares information directly with the others.
Interesting.
The choice really depends on the complexity of the training scenario.
Yeah.
How many people are participating?
Right.
The level of security required.
It sounds like some pretty big technical hurdles.
It is, yeah.
Let's shift gears for a second and think about how AR training might actually change how individual officers approach their work.
Okay.
Not just the training itself, but like their mindset,
Yeah.
out on the streets.
I believe that AR has the potential to make officers more confident,
Okay.
more competent,
Mhm.
more compassionate.
Interesting. So it's about more than just, like technical skills.
It is.
It's about fostering empathy and
Yes.
emotional intelligence
Absolutely.
in law enforcement.
And I think that shift in mindset will have a ripple effect on communities.
Okay.
As officers become more skilled at de-escalation, more culturally sensitive, more
Yeah.
empathetic,
Right.
we should see a reduction in the use of force,
Okay.
improved community relations, and ultimately a safer society.
That's a really hopeful vision
Yeah,
for the future of law
I
enforcement.
think so.
But realistically, there are probably some downsides to think about too.
Of course, as with any powerful technology, there are risks.
Yeah.
We've already talked about desensitization to violence
Right.
and the psychological impact of repeated exposure to these, um, you know, high-stress situations.
Yeah.
Those are things we need to monitor very carefully
Mm-hmm.
and work to mitigate.
And we need to be careful
Absolutely.
that this technology is being used ethically
Yes.
and responsibly.
It's crucial.
We don't want to see it used to like create biased training scenarios
No.
or promote excessive force.
Right. We don't want to go backwards.
How can we ensure that that doesn't happen?
Those are very valid concerns.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be having these conversations now
Mm-hmm.
while the technology is still developing.
Okay.
We need to establish some clear ethical guidelines for developing and using AR training programs.
Yeah.
And we need oversight
Mm-hmm.
to make sure those guidelines are being followed.
It's a good reminder that, technology should serve us, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
But with all these potential risks, why even use AR for police training?
Yeah.
Why not just stick with the traditional methods?
Well, traditional training methods, they have their limitations. It can be very expensive,
Right.
time-consuming,
Yeah.
and it's really difficult to create truly realistic scenarios.
Yeah.
AR offers something that traditional methods just can't.
What's that?
Immersive, realistic experiences that trigger those genuine emotional and physical responses.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed, those responses, they're crucial for learning.
Right. They're how we learn.
Exactly.
So it sounds like it's a matter of balancing the potential benefits
Yeah.
with the potential risks.
Finding that balance
Yeah.
is key.
This conversation has been so thought-provoking.
It has.
I'm really curious to hear what you think, like the long-term implications of widespread AR training might be not just for law enforcement, but for society as a whole.
Yeah. That's a question worth exploring
It is.
in more depth.
Yeah, but first,
Yeah.
let's take a moment to gather our thoughts
That's good.
before we dive into that final part of our discussion. So we've spent this deep dive really exploring, the world of AR police training
Yeah.
from its potential to really, revolutionize how officers are trained to those ethical considerations that we need to, really address.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to kind of broaden our perspective a bit
Okay.
and think about the wider implications of this technology
Right.
for law enforcement and society in general.
Yeah, the big picture.
I'm ready to step into the future. What kind of impact could widespread AR training have on the way policing is actually done?
Well, if we think big picture, one of the most significant impacts could be a shift in focus
Okay.
from reactive policing to a more proactive approach.
Okay. So what do you mean by that?
AR training, it can help officers develop a deeper understanding of, community dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
identify those potential risk factors,
Okay.
and, really build relationships with the people they serve.
That's really interesting. So you're saying that AR could actually help bridge the gap between law enforcement and communities,
Yeah.
fostering trust and collaboration.
Exactly. Imagine officers using AR to virtually walk through neighborhoods,
Okay.
familiarizing themselves with local businesses,
Yeah.
community centers, gathering places.
Okay.
They could practice engaging with residents in those everyday scenarios.
Okay.
Learn how to, build rapport and de-escalate situations before they become confrontational.
It sounds like AR could be a really powerful tool for community policing,
Yeah.
helping officers, really understand those nuances of the communities they serve and build those positive relationships with residents.
Exactly.
What about the impact on crime prevention and response?
Well, AR can play a big role in, improving situational awareness.
Okay.
Officers could use those AR overlays to, access real-time crime data,
Mm-hmm.
identify those high-risk areas,
Okay.
and even simulate those potential crime scenarios
Okay.
to develop effective response strategies.
So it's almost like giving them a virtual command center,
It is.
providing them with all the information they need
Right.
to make those informed decisions in real time.
Yeah. And think about specific high-stakes situations, too,
Okay.
like hostage negotiations,
Right.
active shooter incidents.
Yeah.
AR can create these really realistic simulations
Right.
to let officers practice their communication, their tactical maneuvers,
Mm-hmm.
and, practice decision-making under pressure.
Yeah.
And the beauty of AR is that we can run these simulations again and again.
Right.
So officers can learn from those mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
refine their strategies, but in a safe environment.
Yeah. It seems like AR would also be really valuable for training officers to respond to, like, new and emerging threats.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
cybercrime,
Mhm.
bioterrorism,
Right.
things like that.
It's much easier and safer to create those scenarios virtually than to stage them, in the real world.
That's a good point.
And you hit on a key advantage of AR training, adaptability.
Right.
As those new threats emerge, we can quickly develop and deploy AR training modules
Okay.
so that officers have the knowledge and skills to, respond effectively.
So we can be proactive.
Exactly. And we can use AR to train for large-scale emergencies, too,
Okay. Like what?
like natural disasters,
Okay.
terrorist
Yeah.
attacks,
Right.
so that officers from different agencies can, practice coordinating their responses.
That kind of interagency collaboration, that's got to be crucial,
It is.
especially in a crisis. But, as we've talked about, there are those potential risks,
Yeah.
associated with AR training. What are some of the ethical and societal, implications that we really need to keep in mind as this technology becomes more and more widespread?
Well, one concern is the potential for bias.
Okay.
If the scenarios used in AR training, aren't carefully designed
Yeah.
to really reflect that, diversity of the real world,
Right.
they could actually reinforce existing biases
Okay.
or even create new ones.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about, the content
It
and how it's developed.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that these AR training programs are developed with, input from diverse communities,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're regularly, reviewed and updated
Okay.
to reflect those evolving societal norms.
It makes sense.
And we need to be careful about over-reliance on technology.
Okay.
While AR can be an amazing tool for training and decision-making,
Right.
it's important to remember that it's just a tool.
Right.
It shouldn't replace human judgment.
Yeah.
Critical thinking, or the importance of those real relationships
Mm-hmm.
with the communities officers serve.
It's a good reminder that technology should, augment human capabilities.
Yeah.
Not replace them.
Exactly.
As AR becomes, even more advanced and more integrated into law enforcement, what are some of those key questions that, we should be asking ourselves as a society?
I think we need to ask ourselves, how can we use AR to actually improve accountability and transparency in policing?
Okay, that's a good one.
Could AR be used to, record interactions between officers and the public
Okay.
to provide, valuable evidence in case there's a dispute
Right.
or an allegation of misconduct?
Okay.
Could we use it to monitor officer behavior,
Mm-hmm.
to identify, patterns of excessive force or bias?
Okay.
And how do we make sure that the data collected through AR is used responsibly,
Right.
ethically,
Mm-hmm.
protecting the privacy and the civil liberties of, both officers and citizens?
Those are some really, really important questions.
Oh, are.
That we need to be thinking about. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
what's like the one message you really hope listeners take away from all this?
I want listeners to understand that AR has the potential to really transform law enforcement,
Yeah.
in some really profound ways.
Okay.
It offers both opportunities and challenges.
Right.
It's a powerful tool, but it can be used to improve training,
Mm-hmm.
enhance decision-making,
Yeah.
build stronger community relationships,
Right.
and ultimately create a safer and more just society for everyone.
It's a powerful message.
It is. But it's not a silver bullet.
Right.
It's crucial that we approach its development and implementation thoughtfully,
Yeah.
ethically, and really focus on, the human impact.
The human impact. That's key. Well, thank you so much for sharing your your insights with us today.
Oh, of course. It's been my pleasure.
This deep dive has been incredibly informative
It has.
and thought-provoking. As we sign off today, I want to leave our listeners with, one final thought.
Okay.
We've been focusing on the impact of AR on police training, But the applications of this technology, they go way beyond just law enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about the possibilities in healthcare, education, manufacturing,
Absolutely.
countless other fields. As AR becomes, even more accessible,
Yeah.
even more affordable, we can expect to see it, transforming the way we live, work, interact with the world.
It's an exciting time to be, exploring immersive technology.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
It was great being here.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world of ideas.